Do what?
Conquest.
The conquest. All right, conquest of Canaan. Hold on, let's see if that works. Yeah. If you look to the last thing that happened before you start the book of Joshua, what would it be? You'd have Moses passing away there in the book of Deuteronomy. The last chapter talks about Moses passes on Nebo. If you look at the picture there on the screen, that's pretty much from the top of Mount Nebo looking into the land of Palestine. That's what it looks like. It's a high point that's there. You can see when it's clear all the way over to the Mediterranean easy. Of course, that's not a long ways. We're talking about seeing across a country, and we think of this one. Israel isn't like that. It's not that big of a country at all. It takes you maybe 30 minutes if you're on a highway to go from the north to Jerusalem, from Jerusalem south to the base of the Negev. And what is Israel today would probably take around 20 minutes, 15 really, if you didn't have any problem at all. And from east to west, that's a difficulty, but if you went in the area where there wasn't an impediment because of different tenants of the land, for instance, Israel and the Palestinian Authority, if you went side to side across it, you're talking no more than 10 or 15 minutes to go from one end to the other at a highway type speed. We're talking about a very small area that you look at when you speak of Palestine. And so we're going to be talking about the coming in to that, the conquest that is from that. And what we're going to do is just look at an overview of the text. Tonight we're going to start with the first 4 chapters, if you will, and just go over those. It's in your book. We'll go over some of the questions, put things together. Joshua is one of those books that is not easily outlined by topic. It's more easily seen as kind of a flow that goes through. Let's say you were going to talk about what happened in World War II. And you're going to speak of what happened in World War II from the time that you had the start of the war till you had Nazi Germany take over all of Europe. Typically, how would somebody do that? They'd go from that beginning September there in 1939 and say, here's how much they overtook then, and then the next thing, then they went here, and then they went there, and then they went here. You see that map that kind of is this descending or ever-growing swastika type flag. That's how most of the overviews of that beginning of the war are like that. Then you look at the same thing from D-Day forward. What do? You follow the progress of where the front line went rather than going east to west, then going west to east, back in and overtaking Germany. So you look at it in that way. That's kind of what we're going to do here. There's going to be a campaign that goes in, first off, across Jericho. And as you start there in the conquest of Jericho, they're going to be camped at Gilgal. And as you start that out, then we're going to go and notice how it is part of a southern campaign, then part of a northern campaign that goes along there. There's a campaign that goes toward the west. And in each of those things, what you're going to notice is that they're trying to work out in a segmented way to be able to overcome all of that land and to take it. All right. Now, in chapter 1, what do we have happening? Joshua 1. What's it totally consumed with? Do what? Okay, Joshua is becoming a leader. Who's talking to him? All right, the Lord is. God is. And what does he basically have to tell him?
That he'll be with him like he was with Moses.
Okay. As long as what?
He doesn't forsake him.
Do what?
As long as he obeys him.
Okay, that's right. Go ahead, Larry.
I was gonna say, cut tells him to be strong and good courage.
Okay. Wonder why.
Moses couldn't have figured it out the time Moses done that.
Okay. And pretty much what was Joshua? He was the kind of one that ran the assistant type deal and function of the government there, in the sense of how it was that Israel was working from day to day, especially as they came against Og and Sihon and some of those others that were over Transjordan. Go ahead, Scott.
Well, always thought it amazing that Moses, his eyes weren't dim and his vigor was still strong, and he's died. I mean, you know, the Lord pretty much said, "You're done."
Yeah.
And here's your predecessor, and that, you know, everybody got to see that, and then he wouldn't be running back to Moses or, you know, that Joshua, you know, I mean, it was, thank you for your service, and, you know, and of course he's better off dead than alive when you're a Christian, but it was just, he's done, and here's the next step.
Right.
And all the people could see that, you know.
When you look at what Joshua was told, that as long as you go in and you do what I say, I'll be with you. I'll fight your battles, and you're going to overcome every enemy. There's none that can withstand you as long as you're obedient to me. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Well, if God told him that, then what's he got to be worried about? What's he got to have courage about? I mean, hey, if I'm assured all my battles are going to be won, okay, let's go. I might even be a little foolhardy in there, thinking as long as I'm going out here doing this, I can't be beaten.
Perhaps battling the enemy is not the problem. Perhaps it's dealing with the people.
That's true. There's part of that. What else?
He's still gonna have to fight.
Okay. You know, I can tell somebody all I want to, don't worry about it, you're going to win this. Yet what's going to happen? When they have to go out and do the battle, it doesn't matter how it looks on paper. That still takes courage to get your faith into action to do what is said. And if you'll notice, as we're going through the conquest, what will happen in some of these cases is the army will be pared back. Because God doesn't want them to think they won this by their own power. And there's going to be some unique things that are done so that they're able to see, hey, this isn't about you winning. This isn't about your power. It's about the power of God. But still, they had to put their neck on the line. And so that's true with Joshua, as well as the dealing with the people, which was a problem for Moses and continues to be a problem for Joshua. Go ahead, Thomas.
I think Joshua, like a lot of the Old Testament characters, you know, like this example that you're bringing up, God promising him, you know, that we can be maybe impatient or not really fully understand how he could be scared, or, you know, knowing that that's assured of, you know, by God. But yet, he tells us that, you know, there's no temptation that we cannot bear, and that he's going to give us a way of escape. But yet, we constantly, you know, fall because we think that we have to do it on our own, or we don't give thanks to God because we're trying to take care of it ourselves because we think that God doesn't care about this, or, you know, that this is petty, or so we don't give it to him in the same way. I mean, it's not even in the same comparison. We're not fighting for our lives. You know, sometimes it's, you know, small things that we encounter that we try to put our own back.
All right. Anything else? Go ahead.
He also never says it's going to be easy.
That's right. And it isn't as they go through. There's difficulties that come along there. It's one thing for Moses to be obedient. Moses. Now, Joshua. It's one thing for Joshua to be steeled to the point of saying, I'm going to be obedient to God. But the rest of the people had to be right. I mean, it wasn't just about Joshua being obedient and faithful. The rest of them had to be. When you have theft of some problem that's out there of idols, and you have other things that are done by the people, just like had been done by the people at Mount Sinai when they asked Aaron to build them these calves, the golden calves, to be able to worship. He's going to have to deal with the people's belligerence and their lack of obedience as well. So mainly we're having God speak to Joshua, tell him to be of good courage. You get the people ready because they're about to go over into the promised land to take it. Now, he names that promised land, and what you deal with is the same thing that had been promised to Abraham at the time that we looked at that in Genesis 12 and beyond, right? So what are the markers that are given here? In the book of Joshua, what are the markers that are given? All right, you have the sea here, Mediterranean. What else? Euphrates, that's up here. That's this river right here. It's going to go north to that point. Okay, to Lebanon, which is right in here.
River Jordan.
All right, you've got the River Jordan there, but already they've gone beyond that, hadn't they? They took territory over Transjordan on the east side of the Jordan, and now two and a half tribes are going to go over with them in conquest beyond the Jordan. What else is given? Elsewhere, as we know. The river of Egypt, which is what? We pointed out in the Wadi El Arish. That's this right here. That's where you have this. It doesn't go all the way through over to the Gulf of Aqaba there as it's pictured. This is only one that comes to about right at that point. And it isn't always flowing. It's a wadi. It's able to flow during the time of the rainy season, but during the season of no rain, it dries up and pretty much is kind of a dry creek bed looking thing. But this is the river of Egypt, the river that would divide the beginning of when you would go into Egypt. The Nile is never called the river of Egypt, not once. And it was not called that among the peoples of the land, whether you're speaking of the Hittites or the Egyptians or others. They didn't speak of it in that way. The Nile was separate. It was an entity. The Wadi El Arish was always the one that you talk about there for the border that would be with Egypt. Now, did they get all of this land? That's one of the things we're going to find out in this book. And what we're going to find out is that 3 times it's pointed out everything that God said he would give you, he gave you. They saw the fulfillment of that during that time. A lot of times people will say, well, wait a minute, you don't see all the Israelites, you don't hear about in Joshua them going all the way up to the Euphrates River, for instance. Or them taking over all of Lebanon. What else was said before that we looked at as you're going through Exodus? Were they going to take it all at once? No. Not totally in the taking of that, because there weren't enough people to populate. Let me get my tongue untwisted. To populate it and to govern over it. But as it goes, it's bit by bit that comes about. What you do notice, however, is that they go all the way to the boundaries in this book. You're going to see when it's time for David to come along. During some of the reign of Saul, there's said to be certain borders that are there that are well beyond what you had seen in the book of Joshua. In both the reign of David and of Solomon, it said that they went and regained land by the great river, the river Euphrates. But you never hear about going all the way to the river of Euphrates except in the first chapter of the book of Joshua. But then when it later on tells us 3 times, you got everything that God said he would give you, then we've got to understand that's exactly what Scripture means. It's not that they only got it partially. Many of the premillennialists will talk about that Israel never received all of the land promised. As we go through this book, kind of keep an eye out for that. Premillennialism is one of those little sneaky doctrines that is a part of almost every group. The vast bulk of any denomination today in the evangelical realm, Calvinistic, Reformed theology, most of them believe in some form of premillennialism. And one of the death knells to that theory is to show that yes, Israel did receive all the land that God said. That's not even going to be hard to figure that out. It's going to come out and make it in those words. Here as we study through this book, keep those kind of passages always underlined. It'll help you in talking with others. I notice a lot of times when I talk with those who are even preachers in some of the evangelical groups, ones that I think were probably pretty well taught, they are sometimes astounded because they just have never seen those passages. They haven't read them. They hadn't looked at it. It just floors them when you bring these things out about what the book of Joshua tells us. All right, anything else there? Okay. How about Joshua 2? What do we got there? Go ahead, Larry.
The spies.
All right, the spies are sent out. From where? Some of you have in the, I know in the New King James, I think there's some others as well that use the word acacia grove. That's telling you what it is. That's what the term means. It's like saying Corpus Christi, Texas means body of Christ, and they came from the body of Christ. No, it isn't meant as what it means. It's meant as the city. The city's name is Shittim. S-H-I-T-T-I-M, Shittim. And that's where they crossed over and went from that place to get the spies going into the land. When they went into the land, what part of the land did they go into? Was it like last time when Moses sent spies and they went all through Israel? All right, to Jericho. They were intended to go to Jericho. Wonder why? What's the city that's first going to be overtaken? Jericho. We're going to look at that next time. But as you look at this whole thing, they go in there. They go in and spy out the land. Who do they meet? Rahab, a harlot who takes them in. And what do we know about her? Is this the only place we read about her? Where else do we read about her? Okay, what? Okay. Where else? All right, Hebrews 11 talks about her character. And also in the book of James, that's right. As one who acted, not just faith only, as being the thing of her life. Well, what is she commended for? Is she commended for being a harlot? Okay. When the spies come to her, is she commended for saying they went out another way and you can go and maybe catch them if you go that way real quick? What's that called? A lie. A lot of times you'll find this one to be something that people will go to the scripture and they'll say, look, this is a case of there being a lie, but it was an acceptable lie, something that was commended by God. I challenge you to see anywhere in the Word of God where God commends the lie of Rahab. It doesn't happen. What does he command? All right, what was the faith?
That she tied the scarlet cord around her window, and her family wouldn't perish, that and she didn't tell anybody the plans.
Okay,
She knew of the acts of God previously, and she.
all right. Wonder how she knew about that. Faith comes by. All right. She had somewhere heard that account of the overtaking of the Egyptians and how the sea had swallowed them. She had also heard about the overcoming of Sihon and Og and those who were of the Hittites and the Amorites. That kind of battle had existed on the previous side of the Jordan, on Transjordan, or the western side of the Jordan River. And that's where you had 2.5 tribes take their allotment even now, and their men are going over to fight. But they've already gotten the allotment that they wanted to receive from over there. All of them had heard about this, and as a result of that, what had they concluded? Who had the power? God did. Not that these people had the power. That wouldn't have been something of faith. The faith that Rahab had was to recognize that God, by his power, had maintained these people, and that God was going to give them victory as they came into Jericho as well. Go ahead.
She had more fear of God than she did the king of Jericho.
Exactly.
It says they were, their hearts were fainted or whatever when they heard all that.
Exactly. And that's the point of here. Don't ever let anybody tell you that sometimes lying is okay, and this is an example of it. That's taking something from the Word of God that is never said. There's a lot of times I hear about things that are not right that people do, that in the end come about to work towards a plan for good from God. But it doesn't mean they're commended for doing that evil. God is going to overrule in such things. What really we ought to look at is to recognize something about people. When you look at Abraham, he was called a friend of God and the father of the faithful, right? So did he do everything right? We had talked about that in Genesis. What had happened a couple of times? Yeah, he lied saying that Sarah was his sister. When that was a half-sister, but somebody said it's a half-truth. No, it's not. Anything that's a half-truth is a whole lie. It's intended to deceive. That's what a lie does. And why does the Bible show us that? Because it shows us these people warts and all. Because it maintained, here's the thing about it. You see in a lot of the hero stories that the Greeks have of their heroes that go through, of Odysseus and some other, they'll whitewash everything and make it to where somehow this guy didn't do anything bad. That's not what the Bible does. When they do something bad, it tells about it. And when they do something good, it tells about it. It's not going to try to make it look as if here was a person who was just all right in everything they did, when in fact they also had sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So that's made known. Anything else there? Go ahead.
Rahab, the one that was in the lineage of Christ, the same woman?
Yes, I think so. And I think that is in the book of Matthew, as I recall. Anything else there? Okay. Now we've got Rahab, who's talked to these spies. The spies have said, you'll be saved and your house will be saved if what? You abide in that place where it is, your house. And so that's where they let the strand down from there later on when they compassed the city and so forth. So that place, that house that was in the wall, the text tells us that they would be able to be saved. All right, chapter 3. Now we're moving. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it would have taken some faith for her to stay in that apartment on the wall, when the walls were falling flat. So
Exactly.
hers didn't fall, but everybody, probably everything else did.
That's right. All right. What happens chapter 3? Okay, crossing the Jordan. Everybody get wet going over? What happened? All right. First, God had told Joshua. Joshua told the priest, what do you need to do? You need to walk with what? The ark. As they carried the ark, as they were supposed to, you walk into the river. And what will happen as you put your foot there? The water will stop upstream. You'll be on dry land. And all of them will come over there on in that same way. And they're supposed to stay about how many cubits away from the priests and the ark?
2,000.
All right, about 2,000 cubits. How many would that be?
3,000 feet, about a
Three.
little over half mile.
All right, 3,000 feet, half mile. You think 3,000 feet, what is it? 900 feet is a football field, right? Am I right about that? 100 yards? 300, yeah. All right. Three of those football fields, that'd be nice. So basically what we're talking about is, what, 7 football fields or so in length? A little bit less than that?
10.
But 900. You also have 100 left over from there in the 2, so that'd be...
I thought they were 3,000 feet away from the priests. 3,000 feet away from the priests would be 10 football fields.
Yeah.
I love you, Harry.
Did I get that? Where does it say 3,000 feet?
Well, we went 900 cubits, 2,000 cubits, which is about 3,000 feet, which is about, if you don't include
Okay.
the end
Okay.
zones of the football fields.
If we've got, okay, all right. Now, okay, we'll go that way, and I was going with the longer measure of the cubit, but you're right, let's leave it at the 18. I put that there. Okay, now, with that distance then, as far as how they went downstream from them to go across the river. Now, what happens from that point?
They get the rocks and make the pile.
All right. They're told then you get those who will take those rocks, and that goes not only for this part, the traveling, but then you get into Joshua 4, and that's where you have that part of getting the rocks first, it being seen by Joshua that the place of the people in the river was marked with stones, and then those who go across the river and put the stones up on the other side, evidently going all the way to the place of their encampment near Gilgal, which is not too far from the river at that point. And then what happened? Let me back up a minute because I want to cover something. What were these stones for? Okay. It's called a memorial. What is a memorial?
Something that you remember, that this is a sign, remind you when your children ask in time, what do these stones mean?
Okay.
Tell them.
Do we have any memorials that are given to us in the New Testament? Lord's Supper is a memorial. Anything else named a memorial? I can't think of another thing named as a memorial. However, it's described as the point of what baptism is. It describes the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. That's that's given very plainly as you look at it in Romans 6, and as you look in other places as well, that this is what it stands for. That Christ died, be buried, raised again, so we are in a spiritual sense. But the one that's called a memorial is the Lord's Supper. How is it a memorial? Not trying to be tricky. All right.
The bread represents the body, the vine represents the blood.
Okay. Those two are given as something that represents this. And as we eat the bread, what are we supposed to do? To remember the death of Christ, that he gave his body upon the cross. That's the memory. It's associated with something that's given another meaning, if you will, for us to think about it in that way. You have bread, unleavened bread, but it's given a meaning of us thinking about the body of Christ. All right, the cup is what?
Represents the blood of Christ.
All right, the cup, the fruit of the vine represents the blood of Christ. It's still fruit of the vine, but what do? This do in remembrance of me. Those kind of statements are there about what we have. We're going to later on talk about some things with regard to the Passover later in this study. But it's interesting to me that Paul, especially in dealing with the Lord's Supper in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, makes a parallel point. That the Lord's Supper is a memorial, and it's a memorial within a memorial why? What were they doing when Jesus instituted the Lord's Supper? They were partaking of what? The Passover. When you partook of the Passover, the leader of that meal, the family, was to say, this is the Lord's Passover. Well, when they were eating part of that lamb, and they were eating the other things given, the unleavened bread, the bitter herbs, all of those, was that meal the Passover of the Lord? What did it do? It memorialized it. That's the point. Each one of those things represented things about the life in Egypt that they had left behind. And when he says, this is my body and this is my blood, what's the point? They would have gotten the point because they're partaking of exactly the same kind of thing in the Old Testament at that time. This is the Passover. This is the Lord's Passover. Well, it memorialized that. And that's exactly what they're saying in that time when Jesus first instituted it. That's a statement of what we do now. We remember. There is a memorial that brings to our mind the body and the blood of Christ. Go ahead.
I guess the only difference, though, is that the Passover is a memorial of an event, whereas then the emblems are, like, they actually represent emblems for, the body being the bread, the fruit of the vine being the blood, whereas did the Passover emblems represent certain, I know they were.
You had the bitter herbs and then the bricks that were.
The Passover was about, God passing over these houses where I know that event and they're thinking back on that time when God did that, but those emblems not in the same way represent, as far as the.
Well, you had different things of the Passover events taking place. The bitter herbs had to do with the lack of straw that was there in the making of the bricks, so forth. You had the various things being talked about there. However, in the New Testament, it's the same thing. Am I remembering just the literal body of Jesus or just the literal blood? No, the blood is the life. The whole point of that, when he shed his blood, he gave his life. And the same thing, all of his being as the body, his life or his action in that sort of way, he's given to leave that all so that he might redeem us. you know, you have the same kind of thing of what it stands for. Go ahead, James.
It's also the covenant itself. So he said, this is my blood, new covenant.
Yeah.
So it had to do with this.
No, the covenant itself is not represented by the Lord's Supper. That's the view of some of the one container folks. They say that that one container is the covenant. No, it talks about, do what? No, it's the cup is not the representation. It's talking about the blood of the covenant, not the covenant itself. The covenant is ratified by that blood, is the point. Anybody else? Okay. Now, when you look at when you look there at that idea of what these stones mean, later on, what does Joshua contemplate? What's going to happen, he says later on?
There'll be another generation, and they'll ask the question, well, what did all these stones mean? And they would just to memorize, memorialize the crossing there of the Jordan, and that God was with them.
Okay. Wonder how many generations would need to learn about that. Okay. Everyone except the ones that had seen it happen, right? So if they didn't teach that to every generation, then what happened? There arose a generation that knew what? Not God. There's exactly what happened. This kind of thing with others are supposed to be a memorial where they remembered this, reading the law every year. On each occasion that was given of the holy days, they are to read a particular section of that. At the Sabbath year, they're to do some greater reading of the whole of the law. Within all of this, what you see is God set up cases where people need to be taught in every generation. Wonder what that tells us today.
Train the children up in the way.
Any of you have a great-granddad that knew the Bible real well, or great-grandmother, or then they go down and somebody in that lineage, grandson, great-grandson, daughter, whatever, leave the Lord. What's usually a part of the problem there? What usually is a part of the problem is that somehow that generation has not learned the truth. Whoever has failed as a teacher or as a listener, problem is they aren't learning that word of God. Faith must come from God's will being put in to people. If it doesn't come that way, it doesn't happen. All right, anything else there? Go ahead, Kurt.
It says at the latter part of chapter 4 that the passing over the Jordan is actually a reminder of the passing through the Red Sea.
Correct. That's right. Did I see you, Matt?
Yeah, I don't know if I understood what you said about the covenant in the blood, because 1 Corinthians 25 said, this is Paul.
1 Corinthians 11:25.
Yes, sir. It says, this cup is the new covenant in my blood. So I always took that as, like, we're baptized into his blood and all that kind of works together.
But think about that terminology. This is the new covenant. What? In my blood. You have a ratification, Paul says in Hebrews 10, or Hebrews 9 and Hebrews 10. You have a ratification of the covenant out because of blood. It's called the blood of the covenant in that way. But as Jesus gives the representation of the cup, remember the cup doesn't mean the container. The cup means the contents. That fruit of the vine that you drink, this is the blood of the Lord, or this is the Lord's death till he comes again. Yes, he gave something from that. There are a number of things associated with the blood. Our salvation, the church that was bought, the new covenant. But that blood itself, or that fruit of the vine, the thing memorialized there, Jesus said that is his blood, or his life, as the blood talks about the life throughout the New Testament and Old Testament. All right, anything else there? Okay, we'll stop then. I wanted to go through a few of the questions. Did anybody have any particular problem with any of them? There are a few of them that I thought, this is kind of strangely worded. If you had any questions on any of them, I thought we'd do it. Well, you might think about it. JT will